Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through information, find the core insights, and basically give you that shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're plunging into something many of us think we, get, but maybe don't fully grasp: the concept of worship. We've got some really rich source material here. It explores what worship actually means, its different shapes and forms, and even how it connects, surprisingly, to leadership and global missions. So, our goal today, let's unpack these layers. Why isn't worship just, say, a Sunday morning thing? Why is it maybe fundamental to, human purpose and even spiritual leadership?
Indeed. And what's really striking, I think, is how the source just challenges these common assumptions we might have, the easy answers, and then it grounds everything in these really compelling stories from history, makes it so much clearer. So yeah, we're not just asking what worship is, but why it matters, really matters, personally. And on a bigger stage, too, you might have a few aha moments, I suspect.
Okay, I'm definitely ready for that. So let's dive in. You mentioned challenges. The source starts with a pretty bold claim, doesn't it, about the ultimate battle.
It really does. It kicks off with something that makes you stop and think. The source suggests, and I'm quoting here, the ultimate prize for Satan is not damning a human spirit to eternal fire. Instead, it is robbing God of the worship he deserves from that human spirit forever.
Wow. Okay, that puts a whole different spin on it. The prize is worship. So if that's the battlefield, then figuring out what true worship actually looks like, that becomes critical, right?
Yeah.
How does the source define that and break it down?
Exactly. The definition it gives is a spiritual posture by which we affirm who God is and where he belongs in the hierarchy of our affections. So it's about where God ranks deep down. But here's where it gets interesting. It lays out 3 kinds of worship, and it's actually pretty easy to maybe confuse them.
A spiritual posture. I like that. Not just an action, but where your heart is truly aligned. Okay, let's get into these 3 types. First up is false worship.
Right, false worship. The material says this begins with deception and results in idolatry. Essentially, you're tricked. You end up worshiping something created, not the creator. And what's key here, the source really stresses this, it's not just, ancient statues or something you'd find in a remote village.
Okay, good clarification. So it's not just like the golden calf incident we all know.
Precisely. It quotes A.W. Tozer, who called idolatry a libel on God's character. It basically paints a false picture of God, substitutes something else made in our image, maybe. And the insight, I think, for us today is that idolatry hasn't vanished. It's just sneakier. Maybe it's our career or comfort or how we look or even, political ideas taking that ultimate place.
That's sobering. The source points back to Exodus, the command against having other gods or making an idol in the form of anything. And it emphasizes this isn't just about physical statues. It's anything we give that ultimate loyalty to, anything that pushes God out of first place.
And that connects so clearly to Nebuchadnezzar's giant golden idol, 90 feet high. Our source makes it plain. This wasn't just some random statue. It was basically the king worshiping himself, especially after Daniel told him, "You are that head of gold" in the dream. He wanted the whole statue, demanding everyone bow. It's such a stark picture of misplaced devotion.
Okay, so that's false worship rooted in being tricked, essentially. Yeah. But then there's this second type, maybe even more subtle, vain worship. The source says this one begins with pride and results in hypocrisy. Why is that distinction so important?
It's crucial because apparently God hates this just as much, maybe more sometimes. It's not what you worship, but how. It's the motive. And if you think bigger picture, vain worship, it's not just about you and God being disconnected. It often involves making other people feel bad, through this big show of being religious. I see. It's the performance. Yeah, the source gives those powerful examples. God through Amos saying, I despise your religious feasts. And Jesus directly calling out the Pharisees, quoting Isaiah, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me."
It's all show, right?
Yeah.
Following the rules perfectly, but the heart's not in it. Pure hypocrisy.
Exactly that. And there's this fantastic story, really memorable, about D.L. Moody in London back in 1884. He's at this big campaign, and someone's praying this really long, very self-important prayer. And Moody just interrupts, shouts out, "Let us sing a hymn while our brother finishes his prayer."
He interrupted a prayer in public. Wow.
He did. And this act, so unconventional, so bold, it stopped this young medical student, Wilfred Grenfell, who was literally walking out. Grenfell was just so struck by Moody calling out what he saw as, empty performative worship. He stayed, got converted, became this incredible medical missionary. Moody's interruption wasn't just being rude. It was like this Christ-like act against hypocrisy. And it changed everything for Grenfell.
What a story. That really hammers home the difference, doesn't it, between just going through the motions and genuine heart. Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to the third type, true worship. This is described as beginning with relationship and results in intimacy.
Hmm.
Jesus told the Samaritan woman, true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. This sounds like, well, the real deal.
It absolutely is. And you asked about spirit and truth. That's key. Our spirit, that's the part of us that connects with God, right?
Yeah.
Enables that deep relationship. And truth, well, that's how God shows himself to us. Jesus said, I am the truth. The source points to Moses talking with God face to face as a man speaks with his friend
Yes.
in the tent of meeting. That's the kind of intimacy we're talking about. It's relational.
That face-to-face picture. It's so powerful. It's that spiritual posture again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Putting God first in our affections. You mentioned Tozer again. The source quotes him saying the most vital thing about you is what comes to your mind when you think about God.
Mm-hmm.
So true worship is this mix, like awe and reverence, but also fascination, admiration, deep devotion. Sounds incredibly rich.
It does. And the source adds that this combination, it leads to the most enjoyable state and most purifying emotion the human soul can know. It's like total immersion, a whole heart response to who God actually is.
Okay, this framework, false, vain, true, it helps set the stage for one of the most famous stories about worship in the Bible. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Their choice was literally life or death.
Right. And their defiance, it was aimed squarely at Nebuchadnezzar's golden idol, which, remember, was basically Nebuchadnezzar demanding worship for himself. And the penalty was clear: no ambiguity, get thrown into a ferociously hot furnace.
But they stood firm. And their response, it's in Daniel 3, it's just breathtaking. The God we serve is able to rescue us. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up.
I mean, that's true worship defined, isn't it? Choosing death over bowing, affirming God's power no matter what. And here's a fascinating layer the source adds. This act of obedience, it wasn't just personal courage. It was spiritual warfare. It was actually taking ground back from the enemy. And that commitment, it had this incredible result. The source says when they were thrown in, a divine figure often seen as the pre-incarnate Christ met them in the flames. Their faith didn't just save them from the fire, it brought God into the fire with them.
Wow. So it wasn't just about them as individuals. What about the bigger picture? You mentioned earlier the source says the Jews were even in captivity because of false worship, right? Because of idolatry.
Exactly. So when these three refused to bow, it wasn't just their personal stand. It was like symbolically breaking the power of that idolatry over the whole nation. Their act helped transform things, helped cement their monotheistic faith, even spurred the synagogue system during exile. It started unlocking the chains of false worship for everyone. That's how powerful true worship can be.
That's a huge point. Personal worship having national, even historical impact. Now let's shift slightly. For many of us today, maybe especially today, worship equals music, songs. But the source traces this really interesting history, showing how worship expression has changed over time and has always been bigger than just music.
That's such a critical point to grasp. If we look back, way back to the patriarchal era, I think Abraham worship was mainly about sacrifice. Abraham telling his servants, we will go over there and worship, referring to offering Isaac. Then Moses, in the national leadership era, constantly telling Pharaoh, let my people go so that they may worship the Lord, needing their flocks for sacrifice. It was tangible, physical devotion.
Sacrifice was the foundation then. But then King David's time arrives, the monarchy starts, and the source says music gets this really significant organized role right alongside sacrifice. Musicians appointed specifically for the temple.
Absolutely. The Chronicles mention them ministering with music. Then fast forward to the transitional era, the Babylonian exile. The temple's gone, so the sacrificial system is disrupted. But music, it remains this powerful way to express devotion, even in grief. Think of Psalm 137. How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? Music was clearly still vital. And even Nebuchadnezzar, remember, used all kinds of music to signal when to bow to his idol. Shows its power for good or ill.
And then the spiritual leadership era, Jesus, the early church. Worship sort of reconnects with sacrifice, but a different kind. Jesus and the disciples sing a hymn after the Passover. Paul and Silas sing hymns in prison while, as the source puts it, sacrificing for their faith. And Paul tells believers, offer your bodies as living sacrifices and sing and make music in your heart to the Lord.
It points to this whole life integrated act of devotion. But this raises a really important caution, especially for leaders today. While music is incredibly powerful, moving, creative, the source warns that if we only think of worship as music, leaders who maybe aren't musical might just delegate it. Check it off the list.
And the risk there is they miss the bigger picture, the fundamental nature of worship.
Precisely. Worship, true worship, in its full sense, it's a core leadership responsibility. It's not something you just hand off. And maybe no leader in the Bible showed this better than Moses himself.
That's a really practical insight for anyone leading anything. Okay, zooming out for the final piece here, how does all this connect to the bigger picture of leadership and mission?
The deep dive ends by linking worship, leadership, and missions. And it hits us with that John Piper quote, which is pretty potent. Missions is not the ultimate goal of the church. Worship is. Missions exists because worship doesn't.
Yeah, that quote really flips the script, doesn't it? It forces us to see that true worship puts God, not primarily people or needs, at the absolute center of mission. It's not that human need isn't real or urgent, but the ultimate why is God's worthiness. And this leads directly to what the source calls the presence principle. Moses embodies this perfectly when he tells God, flat out, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. Success without God isn't success. Moses basically drew a line in the sand. Presence was non-negotiable. And how did God respond to that kind of worship-fueled demand?
God responded by revealing his character, his very nature, the foundation for true worship. He declared himself, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. It's this deep, intimate knowledge of who God is that fuels true worship and makes his presence indispensable.
Which really makes you examine your own motivations, doesn't it? The source uses Jonah to contrast this God-centered view with a more, maybe, people-centered or even self-centered view of mission. Jonah hated the Ninevites. He wanted them judged, even though he knew God was gracious and compassionate, the very attributes revealed to Moses.
Exactly. Jonah put his own hatred, his desire for their punishment, ahead of God getting glory and worship from people turning back to him. His focus was totally skewed away from God's heart.
And here's the really telling part. Jonah gets angry and depressed when Nineveh repents. He literally wanted them destroyed more than he wanted God to be worshipped. He knew God leaned towards forgiveness, and he resented it. That shows the danger, doesn't it, of a human-focused view that loses sight of God-centered true worship. Our affections get totally messed up. Wow, okay, we have covered a lot of ground. From Nebuchadnezzar's ego statue to D.L. Moody's bold interruption and the incredible conviction of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire, this deep dive really shows that worship is, well, it's way more complex and central than maybe we often think. It's a powerful force.
Absolutely. We've seen true worship as this deep spiritual posture, starts with a relationship, leads to intimacy with God, and it has massive impact on individuals, on nations. It's not about just singing songs or going through motions. It's about the deepest loyalties of our hearts, and that shapes everything our leadership, why we even do missions. It's about recognizing who God is and giving him his rightful place.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening? It really comes down to examining what or who truly sits on the throne of your affections. Is it something created? Is it maybe your own pride, your own performance? Or is it God himself worshiped genuinely in spirit and in truth?
Which leads to maybe one final question for you to chew on. In your own life, what might be masquerading as worship? Maybe it's even a good thing, but it's not the ultimate thing. What might be subtly distracting you from giving God the true devotion he deserves? That ultimate prize we talked about at the start.
Lots to think about there. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep looking for those aha moments.